The day my daughter-in-law told me I was living beyond what's appropriate for someone my age. I was standing in my own kitchen, holding a casserole dish I had just pulled from the oven, a dish I had made for them because they were coming over for Sunday dinner. I didn't say anything right away. I set the dish down on the trivet, folded the oven mitt over the handle of the drawer the way I always do, and I looked at her. She was already turning toward the living room, already done with the conversation, as though she hadn't just said something that would keep me awake for the next 3 nights. My son was sitting at the table. He didn't look up. I want to tell you something before I go any further. I am 68 years old. I spent 31 years as a licensed physical therapist. I raised 2 children largely on my own after my husband passed when the kids were still in middle school. I own my home. I manage my finances. I take care of myself. And for the past 4 years, I had been quietly, steadily, without complaint or condition, paying for a life that was not my own. Let me explain what I mean by that. When my son Neil married Cassandra, I was happy for him. She was sharp, well-dressed, had opinions about everything from wine to foreign policy. I thought that was good. I thought that meant she was engaged with the world. I didn't realize until much later that having opinions about everything also meant having opinions about me. They bought a house 2 years into the marriage, a nice house. 4 bedrooms, a yard, a neighborhood with good schools, even though they didn't have children yet. The mortgage was manageable, they said, if they were careful. And they were careful for a while. Then Cassandra decided she wanted to leave her job in marketing to start a lifestyle business, selling handmade candles and wellness journals online. I thought, why not? People do that. It takes time to build, and Neil was still working, still bringing in his salary from the architecture firm. What I didn't fully understand at the time was that taking time to build meant the household income had dropped by nearly half, and rather than adjust their spending, they had quietly started leaning on me. It started small, the way these things always do. Neil called one evening and mentioned, almost in passing, that their HVAC system had gone out and the repair estimate was steep. I offered to help. Of course I did. He was my son. The next month, it was the property tax installment, just a few $100s short, nothing major. I covered it. Then Cassandra's car needed new tires. Then they wanted to renovate the kitchen and could I maybe contribute toward the appliances, since I'd told them I wanted to help them build a good home. I said yes. I said yes to all of it. What I didn't realize, what I should have tracked from the beginning but didn't, because I trusted them, because they were family, was how many of those one-time helps had quietly become recurring arrangements. At some point, Neil had started sending me a list each month. Not even asking anymore, just a list. Utilities, streaming subscriptions, the cleaning service, Cassandra's gym membership, their car insurance, groceries over a certain amount, a weekly meal kit delivery, a storage unit rental, a subscription wine service they apparently needed for entertaining. By the time I finally sat down and added it all up, and I mean really sat down, with a yellow legal pad and a cup of coffee, and 2 hours I set aside specifically to face the truth, I counted 63 separate recurring payments I was covering for them every single month. 63. I sat there for a long time after I wrote that number down. I thought about the years after my husband died. I thought about working double shifts on my feet all day so I could keep the kids in the same school district so they wouldn't lose everything stable in their lives all at once. I thought about the vacations I didn't take, the repairs I put off on my own house, the retirement account I had built so carefully, contribution by contribution, decade by decade. I wasn't rich. I was prepared, and there is a very big difference. The dinner where Cassandra said what she said was in October. A few weeks before that, I had redecorated my living room. Nothing extravagant. A new sofa, because the old one had finally given up after 15 years. A couple of throw pillows. A lamp from a home goods store. I had mentioned it to Neil on the phone and he'd said, "Oh, nice." That was all. But apparently it wasn't all, because Cassandra had noticed, and Cassandra had thoughts. You know, she said that Sunday, still half turned toward the living room. Some people your age start simplifying, scaling back. It makes things easier down the line. For everyone. For everyone. I heard what she meant. I was meant to hear it. Neil finally looked up. He didn't say anything to her. He looked at me for just a moment, then looked back down at the table. That was the part that stayed with me longest, not what she said. that he didn't say anything at all. I served the casserole. We ate. I talked about my friend Harriet's new garden, about the weather, about nothing. After they left, I cleaned the kitchen and sat down in the new chair by the window. The one Cassandra had indirectly suggested I shouldn't have bought, and I let myself feel it fully. They were comfortable because of me, and they wanted me to be less so. I didn't sleep much that night, or the next. But by the third night, something had shifted. The hurt was still there, but underneath it, something quieter and more certain had settled in. I had spent 4 years giving without being asked to stop. I had spent 4 years watching my generosity become invisible, then expected, then demanded by implication. I thought about the word Cassandra had used. Appropriate, as though my comfort required their approval, as though the life I had earned needed to fit inside some boundary they had drawn for me. I called my bank on a Wednesday morning. Now, I want to be clear about something, because I've thought about this a great deal. I did not call the bank in anger. I wasn't shaking. I had my legal pad in front of me, the one with the 63 line items, and I went through each one methodically. The customer service representative, a patient young man who kept saying, absolutely, and of course, helped me remove Neil and Cassandra's linked accounts from my automatic payment authorizations. One by one. It took about 40 minutes. We went through every single one. When it was done, he asked if there was anything else I needed. I said no. I thanked him. I hung up. Then I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window for a while. I had told no one I was going to do this, not my friend Harriet. Not my daughter, who lives in Oregon and who had, over the years, gently suggested more than once that I might be giving Neil too much. I hadn't called a lawyer. I hadn't sent a warning. And I've heard from people since that this seems harsh, that they deserved a heads up, a chance to prepare. But here's what I want to say to that. I had given them 4 years of chances. 4 years of watching the amounts grow and saying nothing. 4 years of waiting for my son to look at me across a table and say, Mom, this isn't right. We need to stand on our own. That conversation never came. The list just kept getting longer. A warning in that situation would have only meant an argument. And I was 68 years old, and I had already spent enough of my life arguing with people about whether I deserved to keep what I had earned. The first call came 11 days later. Neil, not Cassandra. His voice was controlled, but I could hear what was underneath it. He said there was some kind of problem with their accounts, some payments that hadn't gone through. He said the gym had sent a notice. The meal kit company had paused their subscription. I said, yes, that's right. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Mom, what did you do? I told him what I had done, calmly, clearly, without apology. I told him I had removed myself from 63 recurring payments, because 63 payments to grown adults who had told me, through a representative, that I was living too comfortably for my age was not something I was able to continue in good conscience. There was a long silence. Then he said, That's not fair, Neil. I said, I paid for your gym membership for 2 years. Did you think that was fair? He didn't answer. Cassandra called the next day. That call was shorter and less controlled. There were words I won't repeat here. There were accusations that I was being vindictive, that I was trying to punish them, that this was not how a mother behaves. I let her finish. Then I said, very quietly, that I wished them both well and that I hoped they would be okay. And I ended the call. I will not pretend that didn't hurt. It did. My son thought I was being unfair. My daughter-in-law thought I was punishing them. And somewhere under the certainty of what I had done, there was still a part of me that was just a mother who had held that baby, who had sat up with him through fevers and bad dreams, who had clapped at every graduation and every small triumph. And that part of me ached in a way I didn't have words for. But I held on to something Harriet said to me later, when I finally told her everything over coffee at her kitchen table. She looked at me for a long time, and then she said, You didn't stop loving him. You just stopped letting love be used as a reason to diminish yourself. I've thought about those words almost every day since. I should tell you about my granddaughter, because she's the part of this story I think about with the most warmth. Cassandra's niece, actually. Not Neil's daughter, they never had children, but a girl named Blythe, 18 years old, who had been in my life since she was about 8. She'd come to family gatherings, then started coming on her own when she got older, because, she said, my house felt like a place where she could breathe. Blythe had never once, ask me for anything. She would come over and help me with my garden. She'd ask about my work, my history, what physical therapy was like in the 1980s, what my husband was like. She genuinely wanted to know. When I'd had a bad week, she'd show up with a box of the specific scents I like and sit with me on the porch without needing to fill the silence. After everything with Neil, it was Blythe who noticed first that I seemed lighter somehow. She came over about a month after the calls had tapered off and said, "Something's different about you. Good different." She didn't pry. She just sat with me, the way she always did, and we watched the birds at the feeder for a while. I had already, by that point, spoken with my attorney. My estate plan had been drafted years ago, back when the kids were teenagers, and I wanted to make sure everything was organized if something happened to me. I updated it after my husband died, and now I updated it again, not out of anger, not as a punishment, but because I had finally been honest with myself about who showed up and who didn't. I didn't remove Neil entirely. He is my son, and I love him, and I hope someday we find our way back to something real. But I restructured things significantly, and I made sure that Blythe was named clearly, specifically, with a letter attached explaining exactly why. I wanted her to know that someone saw her, that someone was watching, and that what she had given me, time, presence, genuine care, was not invisible. My attorney, a steady woman I've trusted for many years, read through everything and looked up at me and said, "This is good, clear reasoning. You know what you're doing." I said I did. It's been 8 months now. Neil and I have spoken twice, short calls. Careful, like two people finding the edges of a new thing, not quite sure where the ground is solid. He hasn't apologized exactly, but he said once that he knows things got out of hand and that he hadn't thought about what it was adding up to. I don't know if that's the beginning of something or just words. I'm trying to stay open to finding out. Cassandra and I have not spoken. My own life in these 8 months has been quieter than I expected. And better. I booked a trip to Portugal in the spring, something I had thought about for years and always found a reason to delay. I repainted my bedroom a color I love, a deep warm gold, and every morning I wake up and it makes me happy. Small thing, real thing. I signed up for a ceramics class at the community center, which I would have said was frivolous before, and which I now think is one of the best decisions I have made in recent memory. Every Tuesday evening, I sit at a wheel with my hands in the clay and I think about nothing else. This is what I've learned, or maybe just remembered, at 68. The people who love you do not require you to shrink. They do not calculate your furniture purchases. They do not describe your comfort as something that needs to be managed. They do not sit quietly at the table while their spouse implies that your life is too much, too bright, too full, too yours. I spent 4 years making myself smaller by degrees, thinking I was helping. I paid for gym memberships and wine subscriptions and a storage unit full of things I will never see. And in return, I was told, by implication, and then directly, that I was living in a way that was inconvenient for people who were spending my money. I pressed the wrong button in October. The casserole dish was still warm. My oven mitt was still folded over the drawer handle. And then, one Wednesday morning, I picked up the phone. I think about Blythe every time I walk through my garden now. She texted me a few weeks ago, just a photo of a ceramic bowl she'd made at her own pottery class. She'd signed up after I told her about mine. She wrote underneath it, "Thought of you. Mine isn't as good as yours yet." And then a small face with a smile. I held my phone for a moment in my kitchen, in my house, surrounded by the things I had earned and kept and chosen. I wrote back, "Keep practicing, you're just getting started."